2, 3. Hello and welcome to the Brainstorm Podcast. And now, your host, Sonny Perlman.
Hey, Menachem.
Hey, Sonny.
This is the first video podcast.
Right, so we're going to try to pretend that we're not being videoed.
It's so weird.
A little off.
Been on a lot of video podcasts and was not feeling weird about it, but this one I'm feeling completely weird about.
I think it's me.
You think it's you?
Yeah, it's the effect that I'm having on you.
You are having an effect on me. But I think it's super appropriate for you to be the first video podcast because I feel that for the last 20 years or so, we've been doing parallel play.
Yeah, that's true.
This is the best way to describe it. We work for the same organization, and so you're doing your thing, and I'm doing my thing, and we've always been like knocking into each other in the middle.
Yeah.
And it's super fun to come together.
Yes, I agree.
So I will say, this is something I haven't told you before, but I will say that one of my inspirations to do a podcast was doing your podcast with you.
Oh, thank you.
No, but I'll tell you why.
Yeah.
Can I tell you why?
Yeah.
I don't know. When I did your podcast, I don't know if you remember, you asked like 7 questions.
Yeah, it's the format that I use. Yeah,
The format. You still using that format?
yeah, I stopped doing interviews because
Okay.
I was interviewing rabbis and therapists, and
Yeah.
they just...
And you ran
to,
out.
It's hard to get them... No,
No.
Honestly, should I be honest? It's hard to get them to be real.
Honest.
It was all like very...
This is exactly what I've been struggling with. Not necessarily that I've had. The more professional someone is, the more polished they are.
Right,
And then all of a sudden, it's not so vulnerable.
right.
That's exactly what I was saying with being on your podcast. What happened? I don't know if you remember this, but I got on your podcast, and you asked these 7 questions, and I wrote 7 good answers. But as I was writing my second answer, I go, if I was sitting in my bathroom, like thinking about this, like really answering this question, like, what's your favorite place in the world?
Right.
It's, maybe my answer, I do like the hotel, but my real answer is, let's say, my bed or my pool, you know what I mean? Or something, So I said, as like a fun thing to do, I'm just going to write my actual vulnerable answer next to it. I'm not going to do it on the podcast.
Right.
And I did that with all 7 answers.
I think you did the vulnerable ones, though.
So that's what happened when I got on the podcast. I was going to start the other one, and I said, what am I doing?
Right.
Really? I'm telling everybody they got to be vulnerable, and I can't do it myself.
Right.
As I don't want to come off wrong or it's going to be bad for my... So I did all the vulnerable stuff. Now, I'll tell you the interesting thing about this that I've told other people, which is that was the first podcast that I was not embarrassed to listen to myself on. I've been interviewed a bunch of times, different...
Right.
I listened to it,
Oh, thank you.
and I enjoyed it thoroughly.
Yeah, it was a good episode.
Not because you were awesome. I can listen to your podcast anytime.
Yeah.
But I didn't have that icky feeling when you listen to yourself.
Right.
You're like
Enough.
you're crawling inside. So I listened to it, and I was like, that was authentically me. There was nothing embarrassing about it. Even though some of the things I said were like kind of really vulnerable.
Right.
So I said, man, I actually saw the idea of doing a podcast as a way for me to get vulnerable. Is that weird?
You saw...
No,
It's not weird.
I am more vulnerable on my podcast than I am in regular conversations with people.
Yeah, well, because you're living in a bubble of a fake universe
Fake universe.
where no one else is actually going to listen to this.
Right.
But they are.
They are. Unfortunately, everybody's listening. And I'm discovering new fans all the time. It's fantastic.
It's fun.
It is.
It's a really cool
Really
medium.
is fun.
It's actually a really cool medium.
It is a perfect medium for me because I want to get my message out and say things to the world, but I want to hide in the basement while I do it.
Right.
Like, I don't want to do it in a big
I think that's what's
platform.
popular about it.
That's what people are getting into it.
Yeah.
Okay, you tell me what you love about podcast, or like you started your podcast. Why did you start a podcast? We'll start there.
I really like the medium. I like the fact of how easy it is. And I feel like, the premise of my podcast is that everyone has a message. Like I have something to say.
Right.
So like, and people that listen to the podcast, do me this, give me the privilege of having voice, being able to give that message voice. But if I have something to say, then other people also have something to say. So I really started off with kind of a parallel of taking an opportunity to express things myself, like essay form, which I'm still doing, and then also to have interviews and give people an opportunity to really kind of share their message. The thing is like, I really felt that like it'd be good for people to really think about what they want to say. That's why I framed it in the 7 questions.
Right.
So that people really have an opportunity to share their strength. I also like have this weird, like, I don't know if it's weird, but aversion to like the story-oriented kind of self-disclosure orientation of a lot of podcasting.
Wait, explain that to me. I'm confused.
I don't like when people go on podcasts and necessarily like just vomit out their story. It doesn't speak to me. So I appreciate that other people appreciate it, and I think that it probably does some good. It just doesn't sit well with me. So having people on to come like share their story was not something that was attractive to me, which is cool. This is one of the cool things about podcasting is that you can kind of like,
you do different ways.
You could frame it however you want.
Right.
So I felt like I really wanted to get to the core of like trying to like understand people's message. So, so we came up with this idea of kind of like doing these 7 questions, which was really cool. It was really great. And then we got sick of doing it with like rabbis and therapists because like I couldn't get beyond like that surface level. So then we decided to start doing young people, and that was really cool. We've been off of doing it, but that's what we're looking to go back to, which is to really give young people a chance to come on.
Because that doesn't end up being their story. It really is wisdom.
No, they have to answer They have to answer questions. It's not about their story. Then it's not about them disclosing like any information. We even asked them not to. We've had a couple people that have kind of insisted on kind of blurting out that they're in recovery, not in recovery. But you know, the young people that we have had on the podcast, it's a very like diverse group. Some people that were always straight shooters who went to college, went to graduate school, got jobs, and some people who were like, you know, got a PhD in, you know,
PhD in life,
riotous living. So it's like, you know.
That's how I used to refer to my past as my field research. This is my field research. I didn't say it then.
Right.
It's like,
but it's not so much about what their journey was to get them there, but it's like try to like give people a platform to like really share.
Right.
Which is what I'm hoping to do.
So the interesting thing that I have is that I'm super fascinated by people that do stuff similar to what I do. Partially from a very selfish perspective, because I can't believe I'm still doing it. First of all, like it's been wild to like give over my life to the people. And lately, as I get healthier, I give over less of my life, but I have a regular personal life as well. But I always like when somebody decides to do something for the world that is beyond them. I'm so curious how other people are doing it. Like it's really, so it sounds weird, and people who listen to my podcast are always like, I'm always asking the question like, how are you still doing it? Or, so it sounds like I'm just professing to the world that I'm totally burnt out, which I am. I'm always in some level of burnout. But it really is because we started, and this is important to you because from when we started, how many people have you seen open and close programs as we were like doing this? You're doing this, you're almost as close as me. Like, we're old timers.
Right.
Dirty gray, dude.
Right. I think I'm more gray than you, actually.
Yeah. I'm doing this, let's say 25 years. You're in this over 20 years as far as I remember.
Yeah.
Like really close. And in that time, I've seen people come and go.
Yeah.
And I still feel passionate about doing it, but it's like to me, you're like one of the legends because you're still here. Even if you did nothing, you'd be a legend.
Right.
You've done a lot, but which I want to ask you about, which you don't share about because you told me you haven't talked about your work, all your work. You talked about your books and you talked about other things, but I want to ask you about the living room, which is what's connected to me.
Right.
But that's really where I started because I love having conversations with people that are doing this work. But I am getting to a point where I do want to branch out and do other things with it. But that was, I think, the whole first year. I just was like, how are you still doing this? What is your trick? Why are you so sick that you spend your life doing this work?
Right.
That's the other.
I mean, it's the point that you bring up. I think that's really interesting to kind of think about. There's an interesting parallel here when you talk about like working with individuals in substance recovery, because longevity does become like a major determinant of success. It's one of the few areas of life where like how long the person is able to do it to some degree. I mean, sometimes to a detrimental degree. That becomes the measure of success. Meaning if someone stays clean for longer, that's a sign that they're doing a better job in their recovery. Now, that's not always true. And, I think we could both agree that like measuring success just based on clean time is like a very antiquated and silly way to do it. That's not,
Yeah, and it also doesn't seem like a 12-step way to do it.
Right.
Okay.
However, having said that, like
they're often correlated though.
Exactly. The power and the miracle of the 12 steps is the fact that it can generate longevity.
Right.
And stability. So even though we don't want to we don't want to congratulate ourselves for sticking around, but I think there's also a kind of reality that there's a skill to longevity, particularly in this space that we're in, kind of in the helping field.
Right.
I was talking to someone about this the other day because I'm also involved in an organization that's like in the other side of part of what's going on here in our village where we're doing treatment. And, you
have to shout out whatever you're talking about.
Okay, so I'm talking about this program Genesis, but I do want to talk about the living room, but I'm talking about this program Genesis, which is
which I'm really excited about now.
Yeah, very excited. It's a clinic and a residential support program.
I had Rabbi Charlap on.
Right, Rabbi Charlap is one of the
I had him on the podcast. He said beautiful things about it, and now you're also so.
Yeah, it's a great institution. So, but part of what we were talking about yesterday, kind of what I'm referencing, is we were having a meeting about something related with some of the leaders behind it, not in terms of like the people executing treatment, but more on the kind of business end. And I was like, listen, guys, like I've been around for 20 years. I've watched countless Jewish rehabs close.
Yeah.
Like if you guys want to just build a rehab that's going to close in 18 months, we'll help some people, but we're going to waste a lot of money and we'll have not done anything substantively for the world. Like the goal is to create something that's sustainable.
Right.
And there's something to that.
There's a lot to that.
There's skill to it.
You're saying there's something to the fact that you've been observing for 20 years, or you're saying...
And there's something to the fact that part of what has driven me for the last 20 years is to create things that have longevity to them, that have the possibility of longevity, to try to create things that are kind of like thought out and like are sustainable, like not to create something that's just going to burn out in 10 seconds. Cause then like, what have you done?
Right.
And not to be shy about that. And I think to some degree, I guess there's definitely an influence there from the work that I do with people in recovery where like the sustainability of recovery is the miracle. Like getting a guy sober is really nice. But if he can't stay sober, like what have you done for him? Yeah, right. I mean, it's nice. I mean, the truth is to some degree, you help a guy get sober, he gets sober, and now he's sober for a little bit, and he's feeling like, oh, wow, maybe I could live my life free of drugs. And then you don't help him build, not you, I'm saying a person, doesn't help them build like a long-term sustainable recovery, and then they relapse, and they fall right back into their old addictive life. If you know anything about the science of addiction, you've actually made them a worse addict. Like the 3 months of being clean, but not having something that was actually substantive that they could rely on. Right. I'm not saying every relapse, because relapse is a normal part of recovery.
Well, why would you say that's worse?
Because
I have my theories, but I'm curious.
It's worse because you've now trained their brain to truly believe that they cannot live without it.
Okay.
Whereas like before, at least they had the hope that they could live without it. But now you've shattered all that hope because they felt like everything was great. They were like, like a boy whistling in the dark is a line that the big book uses of AA, right? Like that, because everyone that gets, everyone that is immersed in intensive addiction, substance abuse addiction, like their lives get very ugly. And then they stop using drugs and their lives get much less ugly. And they start to feel like, oh, this is amazing. Like, awesome. I love not using drugs because this is awesome. The police aren't after them. They're not stealing and lying and cheating, but like there's a whole set of distress triggers that they have not learned, let's say, to deal with.
Right.
And that drugs were kind of facilitating, like the drugs were helping them cope with their emotional triggers.
They do
and
drugs because it works.
Right. Exactly. Right. And if you don't give them like something to rely on, if you don't give them a sustainable solution, then what their brains are taught is that they actually can't live without drugs.
Right.
And then this is their destiny, to live, as a drug addict.
Well, I'm having this. It's interesting. I'm having this thing. It's a tiny bit off the topic, but it's. I'll segue it. I'm having this similar idea. With, I'll have someone be sober for a long time, and then they'll feel like I need to go to a psychiatrist, and then psychiatrists will hook them on like really intense drugs. Now, this is not an anti-psychiatrist statement,
Right?
but I think it has a similar effect. You're like, oh, I really can't live without drugs.
Right.
And I see a lot of these people, it's not that the drug the psychiatrist necessarily gave them was bad, but that thought pattern that, oh, I need to be dependent on drugs for the rest of my life. And often I see those guys go back onto regular drugs.
Well, also because whatever the psychiatrist is going to give them most likely is not going to take care of the entirety of the problem.
No, it won't.
So and even if it does, it will only work for a short period of time because there's only so much like a psychotropic drug can do for you.
Right.
Like there's only so much, even like a benzodiazepine for like anxiety. There's only so much benzos you can take to get rid of anxiety if you have an anxiety disorder.
Just keep taking them.
Right.
That's not how it works.
Right. You build tolerance and then it just stops working. You can't eradicate. Like this is like, like when it comes to like helping people unravel challenges with anxiety, like the role of a prescribed medication for anxiety is to bring your anxiety. This is my perspective.
Yeah.
Is to bring your anxiety down to
This is a very important topic because I'm literally furious about this right now.
It bothers me a lot.
This point.
The role of those drugs, in my mind, is to bring the person's anxiety down to a level that's similar to what most people experience. That's it. It's not to eradicate anxiety because you cannot eradicate anxiety with a drug because everyone has anxiety. If you didn't have anxiety, you'd be dead. Right? It's part of human life. So like for example, in your example, let's say if anxiety was the thing that the person was struggling with,
well,
they
it's
get
usually
clean.
the benzos that do
right?
it.
They get clean and then they're experiencing anxiety because they're human. Right. But maybe they experience it at a level that's much higher than the rest of us do.
Most of the time, addicts do because they've been shutting it down for so long.
Right. So like then they want to get medication. Now, their initial experience is that they take like a benzo, let's say, and it works awesome.
It's amazing.
But then like, shoot forward a month and suddenly it's not working as well anymore. So now like they're operating at like 20% anxiety of a normal person. But a month later, they're operating at 100% of what a normal person is. And now they're like growing.
Right.
And then they're at 120 and then 130. And they've never learned skills to kind of manage anxiety.
Right.
Right? Because they're always going to have anxiety for the rest of their lives.
I really question if any of this stuff ever works at all. I don't mean to. I just with the I believe. I don't believe. I suspect that in 50 years from now, we'll look back at all these psychotropic drugs and be like, "What the hell did we do?" Like the way we look at like lobotomies. Like you cut the head off. Like we used to like, all right, he's crazy. Cut his head off and start poking and, zombie him out like the One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I don't know if you read that or saw that.
Yeah.
And you zombie the guy. And that was, that was the treatment in those days.
Right.
And something about this is driving me insane because, when I'm dealing with addicts, it's especially driving me crazy.
Right.
Because you have all these things that you're talking about. They're not learning how to manage their anxiety. It's not really working. But I also, even with other things like anxiety stuff, these benzos, people are taking them. If you ever want to meet someone with a massive amount of anxiety, just find out who's taking benzos.
Right.
And that doesn't make sense to me because shouldn't they not have the anxiety now?
Right.
They're feeling the anxiety right now. Like everybody around them is like, you're too anxious.
Right.
But they're popping pills all day.
Right.
So it's not healing it. And it's driving me crazy. And I don't know why psychiatrists, I got to bring on somebody who could really talk this topic out with me because I feel completely overwhelmed, and I feel like telling people they have to be off drugs, let's say, to be in my program, is impossible. Everybody comes here. People come here with 12. There's a guy here who just came in with 13 prescriptions.
Right.
What are you doing?
Right.
That's not a healthy breakfast. I don't know what, you know what I mean?
Right.
So it's making me totally frustrated, but I don't know what to do with it.
I don't want to say anything that's like overly like controversial, but
Yeah.
I think a lot of psychiatrists are just arrogant.
That's exactly what I say. Okay.
I know some really good psychiatrists. I want you to know I saw some really good psychiatrists that are
I'm
like
glad you said that afterwards.
superstars.
You fixed it.
Right?
Okay.
I think they're superstars.
Some of my best friends are psychiatrists.
No, I wouldn't say that. I don't have any. No, but, no, but I think that a lot of people they want to feel like they're helping people. And
wait, can I say this?
Yeah.
The training of a psychiatrist. Let's put it this way: a lot of doctors you meet are very arrogant.
Right.
Just doctors, medical
people
doctors.
in the medical field. Yeah.
In the medical field, they're taught that you're right and everybody else is wrong, and tell them to shut up and listen.
Well, they're also trained to look at the world through a materialist lens. They don't look at the world necessarily through like a psychological lens or a spiritual lens. They're not trained that way, at least as professionals.
I don't think they are.
They're not supposed
to. It's very rare. Like, you ever like really questioned a doctor while they were saying, "Oh, you have strep," and you're like, "I don't think it's strep." They're gonna look at you like you're dodo,
right?
And you're like, "I did the test. You have strep. Shut up and go home and take this." Right?
Right.
Psychiatrists are trained like that.
Right.
When I walk into a therapist or a psychologist, their training is more, like you say, spiritual, psychological, and there's a little humility there, although some of them are very arrogant too.
Right.
I have almost never met a psychiatrist that didn't have huge amounts of arrogance, but it's not different than most medical doctors. I'm not trying to knock medical doctors. They're just super confident about what they do.
Listen, I think that doctors have a certain I think we worship doctors a little bit. They keep us well.
Yeah.
And for good reason. Doctors are remarkable. I mean, the medical field is a remarkable thing. We can't take it for granted.
It's amazing.
But I think that part of it is they feel a certain burden to, when I say arrogant, part of that, what I mean by that, some of it's like a narcissism of kindness. It's like, which is not a term I made up.
Okay.
It's like they feel like they're supposed to fix us. So a client comes in and says, "Well, I'm overwhelmed," and they want to fix them. So if I can give you all this,
right,
I'm just going to figure you out and give you the right pill.
That's called the medical model.
And then I'm going to fix that.
Right.
Right.
But here you are, you're dealing with people's minds, emotions, their depth, and there is no pill for almost any of this stuff. And they're pitching it. It's the same way as if you need to put stitches on.
Well, I think it's a little bit more nuanced than that. I think the point is that for anyone to deal with any type of significant mental health issue, they need a multi-pronged approach. I mean it's
right.
Very empty to say that, but they require a medical model perspective, they require a psychological perspective, they require a spiritual perspective, a moral perspective. Human beings are like complex whole
right.
organisms. And if we don't help them with the entirety of themselves and know that whatever part you're playing is only one piece of the puzzle, then you're not really going to help them.
Right.
It's the same thing with psychologists or social workers or people in the recovery sphere. Like if you think you're the whole answer, like you're doing something wrong.
Right.
Right. That's where the arrogance is.
Right.
Right. Like you're not, it's okay. You don't have, and it's okay. You don't have to be the whole answer. You can just be a piece. That's perfectly fine.
I want to tell you, there was a point in my career that I thought I was the whole answer. I'm going to say it. I would say these parents are terrible and they're not helping anybody. I don't know if you experienced anything like this, but I was like, we are the ones that could help these kids.
Right.
There was a period of time. It was serious arrogance.
Right.
Then I was like, these parents are the worst. I don't want to talk to these parents because they're not helping out. The schools are the worst. So this is the worst, and I'm the only one who's going to help them.
Right.
And I failed tons. It made me fail a lot, and I was frustrated, and I just blamed everybody else.
Right.
It was a period of time.
That's what happens. Right.
Yeah.
So you end up blaming everybody else because it's hard to look at yourself.
Yeah. That's the philosophy of our village that we're running here, which I always mention on the podcast, but is that we are a small piece of a huge community of help.
Right.
Layers of support is what we believe.
Right.
And I'm going to segue this to, let's talk about the living room.
Right.
Because the living room has been my top 5 best organizations I've ever dealt with in my life. I'm going to say this.
Thank you.
And I also want to say that one of the reasons I don't know, I think one of the reasons me and you have not burnt out is because we work for the Arab Place family.
Yes.
I think that's definitely one of the reasons.
Yes.
And it's just like we don't have the politics of an organization that like just destroy their staff.
Right.
Which very often, I'm sure you bring that up in all the other places that you go to, like the message that we get from Arab Place, which is awesome. But the living room, I had a lot to do with it early on, and then you took over, but like 18 years ago, 19 years ago,
yeah.
18 years ago.
Yeah.
Could you explain what the living room is and it's the reason it's needed?
Okay, so I'll put it into context of this conversation.
Yeah, please.
Okay, so in the entirety of a person getting well, particularly like specifically in the sphere of like substance recovery, right, which is what the living room is mostly focused on. You know, we've been able to be helpful to a variety of people with a variety of addictions, but our primary mission is to support people who are in recovery from substance abuse, alcoholism, drug addiction, young adults and Jews. And part of what the living room does is that it seeks to fill gaps that exist for people in between the different types of supports that they utilize when they are coming out of substance abuse recovery, treatment, right? Primary substance abuse, like rehab, right? So for example, right? So let's say a guy goes to rehab, he comes out of rehab, right? He needs a place to live, our village, right? And even that place, right? So, but then even, and our village is a bad example because we're doing a lot of, we've learned a lot from each other and we're doing a lot of parallel stuff. But let's say he goes to a sober living, right? But then he also needs a therapist, right? So now he's in therapy and he's in sober living, but then he's also in a recovery program, right? So those are 3 things, right? But there's a lot of like space in between those things and then the person needs a job, right? And then they also need to go to school. They need to figure out what they want to do with their lives. And then maybe they get into a relationship and they need to like figure out how to get along with another person, particularly if they've come from like a really troubled background.
Right.
And part of what we have found over the last 20 years is that, you know, the relapse rates for individuals in recovery is like incredibly high coming out of treatment centers.
Yeah.
Like 5% has become like an acceptable success rate for treatment centers.
Is it really?
It's not acceptable. But
No. I'm saying
people talk about it as if it's normal. It's crazy. It's
I've
crazy.
heard like 20 is great though.
20's amazing. But I think that first of all, that has to do with how you measure success.
Yeah,
right?
forget it. Okay.
Right? Because the whole success rate in rehab thing is stupid. But the success rates are relatively low. However, what we have found, what we proposed and we thought, and obviously we did things wrong before we did them right. But what we found was that if you give people the support that they need to fill in those gaps, right? Meaning introduce them to really good recovery, give them education around recovery, give them education around the parallel between recovery and therapy, meaning what they're hearing from their therapist and what they're hearing at the meeting, which sometimes doesn't always fit together.
Right.
Give them a pathway to explore their Judaism, right? If that's because the programs of recovery are spiritual by nature, people that we're working with are Jewish, they often want to explore their Judaism, but it's not necessarily safe for them to go, you know, into a normative Jewish environment because the messages that they hear sometimes feel like they're being conflicting.
Right.
So to give them space to do that. Help them build healthy relationships with their parents, with a potential spouse, with their spouse that they already have. If you give them that support, that gives them a leg up and a real chance for success. And that the reason why people are not being successful is because they don't have supports in those areas. And therefore, as their life starts to unravel, those supports start to fall away. And eventually it just leads to relapse.
Right.
So that was one piece, right? So the function of what the living room does is to try to fill gaps that exist.
Right.
The other component that the living room does is that, you know, as is known, and this is something I'm sure that's come up on your podcast many times, a vast amount of people that come into substance-related recovery have experienced significant trauma, oftentimes sexual trauma in their childhood or other forms of trauma.
Right.
And others, many of them co-occurring, also have mental illness, mood disorders, et cetera, et cetera. Therefore, what that amounts to is that most people in recovery within the first 3 to 5 years have some type of serious mental health crisis at some point, even if they're doing it the best.
Right.
They could be doing the best job ever, sponsor, work the 12 steps, go to meetings, be of service, have a therapist, get a job, have tons of success. It's almost expected. They're going to have some kind of mental health crisis. If they don't have supports there to pick them up when that mental health crisis occurs, then they're going to fall apart, and that's going to turn into a relapse, and they just go back into the rinse and repeat process of addiction treatment. But if you're positioned to help them with that crisis when it occurs, right, that becomes a point of reference for them to work on their recovery, and it leads to long-term sustained recovery, right? So that's the second thing TLR does, right? The first thing is filling gaps. Second thing is being present. I didn't mention there's also, we have found that within the first 6 months when someone comes out of treatment, once they disengage from like intensive support, they have some type of crash. We call it like a post-rehab crash. I mean, everyone just like finds himself in a place.
You find it 6 months out of I
within
find
6
it at
months.
the year mark.
I have found that it happens within 6 months. There's a different thing.
Yeah.
Okay, we can talk about that for a second.
Go on.
Within the first 6 months of them coming out of treatment, usually it's in the first 3 months, right? But they hit a wall and they feel emotionally lower than they ever did in their addiction.
Yes.
Most people experience that.
And we call it the end of the pink cloud.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
So if you're there, if you're positioned, if you're in a relationship with them and you can help them walk through that, I also have found that like their chance for long-term success has a lot to do with how they encounter that end of the pink cloud. Meaning what they do while they're in the pink cloud is almost just preparation for how they face when the pink cloud ends. If they face that well, they have a good chance of building long-term recovery. If they don't face it well, they don't have a good chance. So
and it's a little bit of a problem because when you're feeling great, you don't think you have to do the work.
Exactly. So they become complacent. Also, you can get along with less work, right? So that's another piece. Another thing that you're talking about is when people come towards the time of their first anniversary, and people in recovery, you'll find a lot of times when they come to the time of year that they have their anniversary, it tends like for the month before, they tend to like struggle. It's a very common thing. Yeah. Part of the reason I think that is, one of my theories is like, well, there's a reason that was their end. Obviously, maybe this time of year is just hard for you. You know, like maybe the end of this,
so interesting.
You know, maybe it's just the time of year, maybe it's the weather, you know, it's the holidays. You know, like if it's somebody who always feels down at the end of the summer, maybe that's part of the problem. The summer ends, school starts, you feel anxious. You know, that's why you bottomed out.
That's why you bottomed out.
You know, I don't know.
That needs research. I never thought of that before.
I don't know. I don't know what you would research to figure that out, but maybe just like previous, because it's a phenomenon that always exists. It definitely exists. The question is the theory. I don't know how you.
I mean, you could just ask, "What's your hardest time of the year?"
Right.
And then find out what their, recovery
what's going
date
on
is.
at that, right?
Like,
exactly.
That's it. Just 2 questions. We can do it on WhatsApp. They have the new.
Right.
You can do it. You just put it on the chat. Like, guys, what's your hardest time of year? And
right. Exactly.
And then a week later, do the other question so they don't realize the correlation.
See if it correlates. So
that's a cool idea.
It's an interesting thing, right? So that also exists. So it's filling gaps, being there, present when they're there, and then the third thing that TLR does, which is every human being needs a community. You know, the Jewish community is well admired by sociologists, the Orthodox community, because we have such strong support systems.
Right.
Everyone's part of a congregation. You just have support. You have people in your life that you're part of something.
We don't even realize how much more that we have in the
right. We don't appreciate
secular world. We just don't.
We have so much, but everyone needs a congregation. Everyone needs to be part of something, a community they're part of. And individuals in recovery oftentimes don't have that. They don't have that anywhere. They're not necessarily they're not in a place in their lives, or they're not necessarily comfortable finding community. And to some degree, they find that community in the rooms of recovery, in the 12-step rooms, but that's limited for most people because, like, especially for young people, right? It's just, there's only so much you can get from an AA home group.
Right.
And oftentimes people in early recovery feel like they're getting all of their communal needs from their AA home group. And then within, some amount of time, 6 months, a year and a half, they find out like, oh, well, no, these people, I can't rely on these people because they're living lives. They have a whole life.
Right.
They're part of other things. They have their own community. They have their own thing. They're not going to be my community. They be my friend. I can get support from them. We can be part of this AA group.
Right.
But that's not who I'm part of. So TLR is focused on creating community for young people. And this has a lot to do with what you're doing here in our village.
It's exact. With our village, we basically, this is a lot of, we're using the living room concepts, but there was a gap of where they live.
Right, exactly.
So everybody, I don't know if you remember, you obviously remember this, but when we came and opened the first sober living, I knew that the living room has to be part of it.
Right.
That's why we dragged you out here. Dragged it over here to Muncie.
Changed the entire trajectory of the living room.
It was wild.
Because now we have 4 different branches.
Yeah, because you guys have grown like
crazy. We shifted the context of how we were doing it.
Right.
Right.
And my plan is to open in our village in each one of your branches. So no pressure. Just keep making them. And that is our plan. No, because we're filling a huge gap, which is really regulating someone's life that they're going on the right trajectory in recovery.
Right.
But every guy here really has to get connected to the living room so that extends out further.
Right.
Also, we have a community here in our village, but we need many communities.
Right.
Like what you're saying is, there's a part you were saying before about the psychiatrist that they're just like a piece of this puzzle, and the therapist is just a piece of the puzzle.
Right.
Your AA home group is a piece of the puzzle. It's a really strong one.
Right.
But there's gaps, so many gaps.
Right.
I think the one thing you didn't mention about the living room is making recovery fun.
Yeah.
I feel like you do that.
Yeah.
I mean, like, maybe we're getting there.
No. I think that part of the question becomes, how do you do that, right? So, like, if you want to, like, do it that way, like, so how do you create a community for people in recovery? So, like, you feel their needs, and part of that is showing them they can have fun in recovery, which is particularly important for young people, because having fun is actually a really important thing to learn how to do. And most young people that abuse substances in their adolescence don't actually learn how to have fun.
They don't know how to have fun
because they have a lot of fun when they're teenagers, but they're not actually having fun because they rely on getting drunk and stoned in order to overcome whatever anxieties and sadness that dominates their life in order to go have fun. But then you take all that stuff away, and now they actually have to learn how to have sober fun, right? And the truth is, most adults in the United States, at least sometimes, rely on, let's say, like a drink to loosen themselves up to have fun.
Right.
And a young alcoholic does not have that liberty. So they have to like do double the work to learn how to have fun. I mean, it's not just fun, it's also boredom. They have to learn how to be bored.
Right. Well, I have an interesting thing because I was living in Israel. I'm going to say a story I don't think I've said before.
Yeah.
Maybe I shouldn't say. Sorry, Ellie. But I started at that when it was one of the first times it occurred to me that I probably shouldn't do any substances anymore. It was just, maybe not any, but like it blew my mind, this idea. I was pretty young. I was living in an apartment with a bunch of guys. And I said, you guys want to go? We live pretty close to the forest area. So I said, you guys want to go make a fire in the forest and like just chill out, bongos, whatever. So everybody looked around, and it turned out that nobody had any drugs on them. The whole apartment was dry. Like there was no drugs.
Right.
No alcohol, no drugs. It was just, and they said as much, like we're out. We're dry. And I said, the question wasn't about
doing
drugs. It was, do you guys want to make a fire in the forest? And they're like, what do you mean?
Right.
Like, we don't have any drugs. It's not going to be fun.
Right.
To do a fire. I'm like, but what about just having the fire? Isn't that fun?
Right.
And there was literally confusion on everybody else's faces. And maybe that's when I discovered I'm not an addict. But everybody was looking around going, I don't get it. They looked at me like I was out of my mind,
right.
Which I found fascinating. And I said, this is really bad. We don't know how to have fun.
Right.
Without it. Maybe I was the only one who did not have fun. I don't know. I didn't go to the forest.
Right.
It was an idea.
But you had a moment of clarity.
But I had a moment of clarity, and it was like, it really struck me, and I still live with that moment of clarity.
Right. That what seems sane is actually insane.
It's insane.
Right. Like the drugs stop being fun when you need them to have fun.
Right.
Then you're not having fun. You're just doing drugs.
So it is super important. Like I feel like, so we do here, like Wednesday night, we have to go out and have a good time.
Right.
And the crazy thing is we pay tons of money for guys to go out and do really fun things. We're doing axe throwing. We're doing things that cost us a lot of money. And I think of it as therapeutic, and they need to do it.
Yeah.
It's because they need to learn fun. It is pulling teeth every single week.
Right.
I have here in the audience Nafti, who's silently listening, but our house manager, like, has to fight these guys to get them to come on a fun activity.
Right.
But I believe if they go through here 6 months of here and they don't join that activity, they're never going to learn how to have fun.
Right. Well, if you think about it, like think about how much anxiety they must be experiencing.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I have to go have fun. But,
It's a lot.
And all of like the reasons that we avoid fun, because of what it triggers inside of us, or, the discomfort that it causes. Not everybody likes hanging out.
Right.
And, what if I have a good time and then, like, what if I'm not comfortable with it? It's a lot. It's a lot. It's an interesting thing that a young addict kind of has to go through.
But I think it's everybody. Like you see people burning out in life. So and they're doing things right. They're doing things right. They're going to work. They're going to school. They're doing their life.
Right.
And it becomes a drag, and they're not having a good time doing it. Those people, they'll mess up. Like, however they'll mess up because we as humans need to be enjoying what we're doing.
Right.
We could only last a certain period of time before you're ready to blow up. Right. Addicts more than anybody.
Right.
But it happens with me all the time. Like if I'm not doing something that's exciting, even like I stopped my private practice because my supervisor Trish said to me, you should take a break and till you really love it again. And I thought to myself, like, I don't love this at all. I'm not enjoying myself. And when that occurred to me, I'm like, okay, I'm out.
Right.
I'm just not going to do this right now.
So what you're talking about now is a totally different thing, which I think is a very, very important thing, because like there could be like having fun could be like doing something that's objectively should be fun and enjoyable. And that's a good thing.
Right.
But then there's like learning how to have fun with whatever you're doing. Right. Which is really the key. You need to learn to have fun all the time. Right. So it's not just like you need to learn how to enjoy axe throwing. You have to learn how to like enjoy your job. And if you're not enjoying what you're doing, then there's a limit to how far it can take you. You know, even if enjoying what you're doing is like rewarding yourself for the benefits, I don't think you necessarily have to love your job like functionally, but like if you don't feel a sense of reward from the successes of your job and connect those two things.
Right.
That's an example. Like a guy makes a lot of money, so he buys himself a nice sports car. So then if he doesn't realize that the sports car is a direct outcome of his job, then he goes to work. His work becomes the annoying thing he has to do in between the hour of his week when he gets to drive his sports car. Right. So then he like lives for an hour a week. That's very sad.
It is very sad.
So
I feel like a lot of us are living that way though.
Right. I agree with you. I think, and I think that the separation is like a shift in consciousness. It's a shift in attitude, right? It's really like taking time to like be mindful of like how fortunate I am to have a job that pays me a lot of money so that I can reward myself and my family with abundance. At the very least, aside from the fact that like most jobs like can be a lot of fun if you enjoy them. I mean, maybe you're in the wrong career, but most of us are not. Most of us are in the career that we're suited to. That's why we ended up there. So it's like, okay, well, how can I find a way to enjoy this, right? So like, okay, so I'm in my private practice as a social worker, but I'm not having a good time. So what should I do? Oh, well, I don't know. Let me like open a sober living and start a podcast. Right. So I can have a blast doing what I love within the context of the work that I'm doing. It's not, you didn't stop being a social worker and go back to school. No. Right. It's the same thing with like, people ask me all the time, oh, it must be so meaningful to have a job that's meaningful. Right.
Right.
But like, I don't know, social work can be very unmeaningful. Like I've been in moments in career where it's like, this is so not meaningful, because it could be the least meaningful, because if I hate what I'm doing, right, then I resent the people I'm helping. You know, I'm just trying to like, I can get into a place where like, we're just trying to squeeze a little bit of cash out of these like poor, like, and then I hate myself. Right. Like the least meaningful thing in the world. So I think any job can be meaningful if you shift your consciousness properly, if you realize that it's a privilege to do what you're doing, and to realize that you're producing and you're helping other people and you're doing amazing things. When that shift of consciousness occurs, like you feel meaningful, and then usually you're having a good time. You're enjoying it. You're like having a blast.
I wonder if humans could do the same thing if there's a time period.
Now we're talking about the longevity thing.
Yes.
Back to that.
We're back. Because I get really, really excited about things. Right. And to the point where everybody is like, shut up already. It's you talking too much about this topic. And it to the point where people think I'm bragging, which maybe I am. I don't know. But when I get into something, you can't shut me up about it. Right. I'm so excited. But that only lasts, and I don't mind keep doing it. But then I'm excited about something else. Like maybe it'll last 2 years, 3 years. And then I'm excited about something else. But the thing is, I built a whole career on things I got excited about. Right. So I wonder if there's a time period, or it's just me who like gets excited. It's not that I leave all excitement from the other thing. It's just that I'm brand new excited about other things. And I think about the human condition, and I'm like, are we supposed to be shifting, or are we always just supposed to be like be able to meditate and like, this is where I am, or wherever I am is great, or are we getting, like, I get bored. I don't say bored. I never get bored. I shouldn't say I'm bored. I get more excited about something else I'm not doing, so I'm still doing the thing I don't want to, that I'm not as excited about anymore. And then it goes on and on and on for years.
Right.
And I'm wondering if, like, we should just be setting ourselves up. Like you were mentioning before that we have a program, you have a program in Israel, we have a program here, very similar. Like every 6 months, switch the staff so they can like kind of experience a new excitement.
Right.
Maybe we're all supposed to do this.
I don't know. I feel like
this is a therapy. You're a therapist. Help me here. Help me.
It's interesting because, like, even as you're sitting here saying that, talking about how, like, you get excited and do different things for short periods of time, like, at the same time, like, we've both been working for the same organization for 2 decades.
Forever.
Right. Like that, and that shows a measure of consistency.
Oh, I'm super consistent. I'll
part
go
of-
forever. But the question is,
So part of
Right, okay,
part of what I
explain.
feel like you're highlighting is that, like, it's really important to not let yourself get stuck in the comfort of a rut and to always push yourself more and more and more. Like the minute which I think was something that I resisted for a long time, and then over the last 10 years, probably I would say, but like consistently, like extensively, more and more over the last 5 years, it's just like always do more. What's next? Like I'm always working
there's
on a
been some
project.
sort of shift in you. Could I ask you about that?
Yeah.
No, because I remember when I feel like I bamboozled you to have a Muncie branch.
Yeah, I was comfortable.
It was like you were good, and I was like, you need a Muncie branch. And you're like, well, I don't know how we're going to do it. And I was like, no problem. I'll pay for it. I got this. And
Right.
of course, I dropped you after a year. But I'm like, you got this from here.
Right.
But there was a point, there was like resistance. And now you're up to 4 branches. You got corporate headquarters. You got you're moving. You're doing the rehab now. You got the podcast.
Yeah.
What happened? I'm curious.
So it's fun. It's interesting. I think there was always a part of me that wanted to like grow. Like if I'm being like reflective about it, there's always a part of me that wanted to just grow methodically. Like the living room was like started very small. We were like 20 kids.
Right.
Like when we started, we adopted from stuff that would have been going on before our place had a program. It kind of fizzled out.
Right.
And then Kiwi and I, your brother Kiwi, is one of my favorite people in the universe, on the
Yes.
planet, after my wife and kids.
That's true.
Kiwi, whatever.
Shout out to Kiwi.
I really love Kiwi. So Kiwi and I and my dear friend Gittel Folman, we kind of took that over and kind of created the living room, which is different than what was there before. It was like more of an Our Place drop-in style, but we shifted it.
Yeah.
And
It needed the shift.
yeah, thank God, which is great.
Yeah.
And it was really good. And then it just kind of began to grow and was
Right.
growing kind of methodically. And I was kind of very satisfied with that.
Right.
I didn't really want to do more than that. And then part of what happened was like materially the work kind of made it so that it was like there was more people that needed different kind of help that I wasn't able to help within that framework, right? Like people in Muncie, right? Like which had to do with you, but also like people were getting on in recovery and they weren't going to come to the living room twice a week for our programming because they were busy.
Right.
So we had to like adapt our program so that we could help those people because we don't want them coming twice a week. They're married, have a family, have a job. They need the community of TLR. It's beneficial for them, particularly when they go through that episode of distress.
Right.
But like we need to create a system where we can help the people that are newly out of treatment who need to come, twice a week to TLR, and also help the people that want to come by once a month or twice a month plus come to a retreat. So we started to adapt what TLR was and expand it. And then as my consciousness shifted about it, it was like, okay, well, maybe we could do more. And then part of it was like an openness to, I was like a huge misnagid. It's funny, Tzitz Kislev.
Yeah.
Talked about it.
Really?
So I was a huge misnagid, yeah.
When were you huge Misnagid?
Like until 15 years ago, 16 years ago,
Okay.
17 years ago. So
I always knew the little Hasidus in you.
So
Most of the time.
well, not in the beginning. I was
Not in the
very,
beginning. No.
I was always into Musser and stuff like that. I was
Right,
always
right,
into
right.
Panemius, but I was like very, very like oppositional to Hasidus. I'd gone to like more Litvish yeshivas.
Right.
I didn't grow up from until I was like 11, and then I was like a Baal Tshuva kid. But then like as I moved further and further into Orthodoxy, I went to fairly normative Litvish yeshivas, and I was like,
Right.
pretty into it, you know, because I was coming. I didn't feel it never felt forced for me because my family grew into it. So like
Right.
I didn't have that experience. So I like went to regular yeshivas, and I loved learning, and I loved it, and I was like into it. So I always wanted kind of like Panemius, like stuff that spoke to the heart. You know, I loved Musser. I loved Rav Dessler, right? But Shana Shmuel Hirsch, like I love that stuff.
Right.
But Hasidus was always like off limits. Like you weren't allowed to. That was like, you know, that was like off. And there were also cultural things about Hasidim, like people that are Hasidish, that were like hard for me as like a kid that grew up in Palo Alto, California. It was just like the culture felt off, right? So it was hard for me to like. There was a point of access.
A little Amishy.
It was hard. It was hard for me. I also moved to New York in '94, shortly like before the Histokos of the Lubavitch Rebbe. So there was a lot of like anti-Mashiachis stuff going on. So I was like very confused about what that was. Even though Chabad had been influential in my family becoming religious. So,
I didn't know that.
Yeah. It's
So
a cool story. My dad was in, I was just thinking about this morning. My dad was in my family. My parents always had a very like rich Jewish like orientation. Like we went to shul every Shabbos, conservative, but like we were very Jewish. Went to day schools. So there was a Lag BaOmer parade one year. We probably figured out the year because it didn't happen every year on a Sunday. And my parents were like, oh, let's go to Crown Heights to the Lag BaOmer parade. Chabad was doing. Like it was just fun.
Right.
I remember my aunt and uncle and the cousins. We all went. I don't remember this. I was very young. And a Lubavitcher asked my father, like, oh, do you want to put on tefillin? And my father's like, no. He was totally irreligious, right? But it got him thinking. He said, are you Jewish? Do you want to put on tefillin? My father said no. And it got him thinking that he had tefillin up in the attic and he should go find them. So he went home and he found them, and then he decided he'd put them on. He was 26. And then he kept putting them on every day after that. It's a funny thing. Just from a guy asking, right? He kept putting them on.
He said no to that guy.
He said no to that guy just to ask him.
And then he went home and did it.
He went home and did it, and then he put on tefillin every day until they were like 31, 32. I don't remember exactly the age, but like much later when we moved to California. And I was a little bit older, like we became more frum. So like that was a Chabad, that seed, but also there was a shliach there, but it was mostly not through Chabad.
Right.
But I had this resistance to it. And then through my experience, I mean, I'm working with people in recovery and I'm inviting them to be like open-minded. And I'm like the most closed-minded like person. I'm like so closed-minded because I'm scared to learn like a Hasidic sefer. Like, cause like what? They were going to like, I don't know, like influence me or something.
You gotta grow the curlies.
Right, exactly. So but whatever, eventually, like prodding, I got exposed to Rav Moshe Weinberger, which was like a big thing.
Right.
That was a big party. He's my Rebbe, and like he had a tremendous influence on me. I remember the first time he told me to learn Tanya, I was like, what? He's like, no, you should learn Tanya. I'm like, really? Like Chabad?
Right.
Like I was okay with like learning some Nesiva Shalom, but like Tanya?
Right.
Like I don't know if people are listening, they understand the context of all this stuff. But I was like very resistant, particularly to Chabad. But
Nesiva Shalom was like dabbling.
Yeah, it's like dabbling.
Tanya's like, oh my God, I'm fully in.
So I did, and I met this guy who's a dear friend of mine. I have my second podcast with Mayor Prager, who's like my mashpia in Chabad, and he started teaching me Chabad and Chabad Hasidus, and then other Hasidus and Breslov, and that was been like a 15-year journey into.
That started
Hasidus.
15 years ago?
That started 15 years ago.
Wow.
So
do we mention Yotes
Kislev? So
today?
In the
Whenever
last 5 years, I've become like completely, I like accepted the fact that I was totally like a chassid of the Rebbe, of Chabad, right? I feel attached to Breslov, very connected to Rabbi Nachman, and if I wasn't a Chabad chassid, I'd be a Breslov chassid, but I consider myself a Chabad chassid. I became very connected to the Rebbe. I go to the Oel all the time. I feel very deeply connected to him, and part of what it means to be a chassid of the Rebbe is like it's never enough, like more, like do more.
Wow. So
like the Rebbe hit his 70th birthday and he said, we're going to do 70 new things. Like that's the way he worked.
Right.
And so I had this like thing going on professionally where I was like trying to do more and try to be adaptive and be open-minded, which is part of influence of Hasidus, but like it hadn't connected spiritually. And then I like woke up one day and realized like I was like totally bottled to the rabbi, like disconnected to the rabbi and this Hasidus. And I was like, this is it. I realized that this is like spiritual influence. Like I need to do more. I need to do as much as possible. So like Corona hit, and which saved my life because I can't imagine what would have happened if I had done what many people did.
What do you mean?
During COVID and just like taking a break. Like a lot of people just mailed it in, like COVID, and they're suffering from it today even.
Yeah.
Still. I didn't. I doubled up.
We didn't even slow down.
Right.
I had the same thing.
Right. I doubled
built
up.
the program. It was like nonstop.
We went virtual. I wrote another book, right? Like
Right.
I started a podcast. I mean, I had started the podcast a little bit, but I doubled down on the podcast and, it's just like, okay, like shift, adapt, have fun, do more, and it hasn't stopped. I'm wondering when it's going to stop. Like, when am I going to burn out? But like the more I do, the more energy I have. That's my experience. I'm not like doing too much. I try to take good care of myself.
Right.
I sleep like 5 hours a night. Right.
That's not good care.
No, but which is funny,
you.
Right? That people think I'm weird, right? But I don't need more than that. And when I need more than that, I sleep more than that. Like last night, like usually I get up at 4:30. This morning I woke up at 5:30. I don't beat myself up about it. And if I needed to wake up at 7:30, I wake up at 7:30. Now I used to not be that way. If I overslept by 15 minutes or an hour, I'd ruin my day.
Right.
And usually oversleeping by 15 minutes would turn into oversleeping by 3 hours. That's how I used to live.
Right.
But I don't have to live that way because like I'm doing the best I can. Like I'm just doing as much as I can, the best I can. If I have to slow down, if I have to take a break, I'll take a break. But like, let me do as much as I can.
Okay, this is a fascinating shift here because at the same time you're pushing yourself really hard, you're beating yourself up less.
Right.
That's wild.
Yes.
Usually it's the opposite. I mean,
Right.
usually they go together.
Yeah, I know. It was a shift.
You know what it is? You're on shlichus.
Right.
Holy cow.
Yeah, it is. It really is.
You just explained it. Your beard's too short for me to understand. And now I understand. Sometimes I look at people like on shlichus and Chabad.
Oh, shluchim are like.
And they're on fire. What is going on with these
Halavai
guys?
should be a shliach. But like I get the energy. Like they have so much energy, those guys. It's crazy. I could never be. I have no like
there's a mission.
Desire, but like they're just more and more and more. It's amazing. It's remarkable. It's such a cool thing.
It is a cool thing, and it actually explains a question I had because I remember pulling your teeth at 7 years ago.
Yeah.
And then you've been on fire. I'm saying it was 7 years ago.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I opened the place 7 years ago.
Oh, yeah, so it makes sense. Like chronologically, it's like it makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Right, and now you're building new places and doing new things. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
And I just think of it as exhausting. Like, wow, I'm doing the same thing.
I mean, it's exhausting.
Right.
Like and sometimes I push myself too far, but I've been really working on that not beating myself up thing.
Right.
Like, and that was work because I not like that naturally.
So it's so paradoxical. Like I have also a similar thing. I saw it differently. I saw it as the less I thought it was about me. Meaning, like when I first started in this field, I think it was all about me getting the validation of others and really making the world say, "Wow, Sonny Perlman's he's just the best."
Proving to the world I mattered.
I matter. I will make you love me. So definitely had that. And as I got healthier, like a couple of things happened. Like as I started realizing, like I really don't care what the world thinks. Like I think I do a little bit, but the work kind of got harder because now I don't have this hungry drive that I got to do this right now.
Right.
But I knew I wanted to do the work. So like I'm going on, shlichus kind of like now I'm just doing it because it's the right thing to do. You just do it.
Right.
But as I got to a place where I stopped beating myself up as much, I realized I could accomplish so much more.
Right.
Like I used to be terrified of stopping to worry. Like because worry and guilt is my fuel, like pushes me.
Yes.
And I was so terrified that if that fuel was gone, I just would stop.
Right.
Meanwhile, I think I've accomplished more since I stopped worrying and beating myself up than I could have ever imagined the other way. because I was like micromanaging and everything was like had to be perfect. And now it's, you know, like, oh, I have a whole staff. Let's do this, let's do that. That.
So you're saying the most important thing is to be really authentic.
We had a technical difficulties. I was trying to make that smooth. So you're saying, I have no idea what you're saying. We were talking about such an awesome topic where we're talking about, and you were putting it in a way that we take these toxic things and you use them as a force to move us forward. Right. What were you saying?
It's interesting because a lot of people sometimes they've experienced toxic people in their lives.
Yeah.
And then that toxic person in their history becomes the voice in their head, but it's actually them. Right? It's not the toxic person anymore because that person's gone.
Right.
Right. It's actually them like shaming themselves or beating themselves up, which is two different things, right? Like you're stupid or an idiot versus shame, like you're terrible, horrible. Or just like using negative reinforcement to keep ourselves accountable to being the person that we want to be. Right. So I can't not beat myself up. I can't not push myself too far. I can't, because if I let myself off the hook,
right,
what I'm going to do is actually,
right. You have to say that was mean. I should apologize.
Right. To myself.
To myself or to someone else. Like you have to keep yourself accountable. We have a reason for beating ourselves up.
We can't keep ourselves accountable through toxicity.
Right.
It's interesting. I was actually I'll give him credit. Avi Fisher. I was in this like chabur with Avi Fisher for learning Nesiva Shalom.
Right.
And one of the guys is like more yeshivish. And this is like, I don't know, literally, 13 years ago, 12 years ago. And he posed a question. Avi was like giving the chabur. It was like 4 guys, I think. We were like learning once a week in the afternoon. And the guy was like, well, if you Nesiva Shalom is like repeatedly about like how much Hashem loves us.
Right.
And how like the Jewish people are loved unconditionally. Bein kach ubeikach nikrubanim. Right? They're loved, they're called their sons no matter what, which is one of the opinions in the Gemara. So, and he repeats it. Like it's like every Torah is like some kind of ahavas Yisrael, God loves you no matter what kind of orientation. So the guy kind of like got sick of it. He was like if you tell this to people that God loves them unconditionally, why wouldn't they just do sins all the day?
Right.
So everyone like stopped. Like, okay, what's he going to answer? Right. And Avi had a great answer.
Yeah.
It was really great. And it was like it was mind blowing to me because I didn't have like the guts to like verbalize that kind of negative view of other people. But he was like, you don't understand people. If you tell people they're awesome, they'll want to be more awesome. And if you tell people they're terrible, they'll just be terrible. And like, it was like, wow, like that's what I do to myself.
Yeah.
Right. I think that if I don't beat myself up like toxically, I'm not talking about holding myself accountable. Holding yourself accountable is key. Learning how to look in the mirror, learning how to like write down and acknowledge when you did something wrong, learning how to say you're sorry, like really, not just to get the person off your back, but really like get into an argument. Like this morning I had an argument with my wife and I just like 20 minutes later, not that minute, right?
Right.
Like 20 minutes, I'm sorry. And I was wrong and et cetera. Like you have to be able to do that, right? Not that I'm like the paradigm of health, but like you have to learn how to do that. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like toxically holding yourself accountable. Like, because if I don't, what's going to happen is the beast inside of me that wants to be a scumbag is going to come out and dominate my life. And I'm going to end up living a life that I don't really want to live. The whole thing is so sick, right? I want to be righteous. I want to be a good person. And I want to live riotously. But if I don't beat myself up, I'm going to end up not doing that. No, that's not true. What happens is if I motivate myself and discipline myself.
I didn't see it in my own life. Like I've been preaching this for a long time.
Yeah.
Or something like this to people that I dealt with. But if I didn't see it in my own life, I don't know if I would have believed it. Like,
what's seen that to be true?
The fact that I really have stopped beating myself up, or not stop, but like it's gone to very little, and I accomplish more.
Right.
And I feel better about myself while I'm doing it. And I don't think I would have believed this if you told it to me, like, oh, okay. I don't believe it. I have to beat myself up. Like, I'm that guy in the group.
Right.
A very yeshivish guy.
It's like a very subtle, I think we all are. That's the misnagid inside of us.
Right.
And I don't mean that from like an anti-Hasidic misnaga, but hisnagdos is like, it's like this like sick. I don't mean the philosophical mistake.
Some of your best friends was
Right, exactly. I don't mean that way, but like this kind of like closed-minded oppositional perspective, cynical perspective on ourselves, on other people. It's so toxic, and it just leads to further toxicity.
Yeah.
And the only antidote to that is the opposite. And that, now again, that doesn't mean that you don't have to hold yourself accountable. You have to hold yourself accountable.
Right.
Because you're going too much in the opposite extreme, meaning no accountability, no discipline, no like facing yourself is just as narcissistic as like looking at yourself in such a toxic, terrible way that you end up acting like selfish and self-centered. But if you learn how to like really enrich yourself and inspire yourself and invest in yourself, like I am worthy enough to feel, to hold myself accountable. I deserve, this is like a big thing. I'm actually publishing a book that talks a lot about this. I'm in the middle.
Oh, wow.
Shameless plug.
Okay.
It's called Acceptance.
Nice.
Hoping it's gonna come out in the next couple months. But this is a big piece for me. Like this is something I've really like tried to like own for myself and like want to communicate to people. That there's a separation between saying like, I can't believe I did that, I'm so ashamed of myself, and I can't believe I did that, I truly acted beneath myself. And the difference between those two things is one tells you that you're worth nothing, and one tells you that you're worth everything. You just happen to have acted beneath yourself.
Right.
The second is a self-esteem affirming statement. I deserve to behave better, right? So even though I'm beating myself up, so to speak, I'm holding myself accountable. I'm holding myself accountable because I deserve to live better, because I love myself. I deserve, I am called to, that's like where the shlichus thing comes in. That kind of like deprecation, right? That kind of like accountability is good for me. It builds me. But the very subtle line between that and like, I'm such a piece of garbage, right, is a universe apart, because the second one leads you to misbehave more.
Right.
Right? It leads
it's
you to
so
do
interesting
less.
when you put it those words. I'm just thinking of the words of parenting. We're both parents.
Right.
This is so obvious in parenting. Like to tell your kid you're a piece of garbage.
Right.
You know that's not going to help them.
Right.
Like, you're a piece of garbage, get your act together, go do something. It's just not going to work.
Right.
But if you say, hey, this is, what's the word that it's beneath you? I forgot it. You say it in like Yiddish, like the Poznanski.
Right.
Like you just look at them, you're like, you're amazing.
Right.
This is not how amazing people act all the time. Like,
right.
And
it's funny because there's an energy there, because you could say to someone like, it's Poznanski, right? And what you really mean is like, you've deeply disappointed me. I'm ashamed of you.
Right. Okay.
Right?
Well,
that's
a twist
toxic.
on it.
Right. It's because it's really about the energy that's behind that.
Right.
Right. Or I could say it's Poznanski because like you're awesome.
It's like, you're awesome.
And I don't want you to have to live that way.
Right.
Right. Like, let's try not, how can we not live that way anymore? How can I help you?
But
not
it's
live
such
that
an
way?
amazing thing, because you're saying something like, we're constantly parenting ourselves.
Right.
Constantly.
Yes.
And we constantly parent ourselves poorly.
Right.
But I really, really, in my depth, believe if I don't parent myself poorly, I won't move forward until I stop doing that.
Right.
And then
I mean,
realize
how many times have parents, like, you talk to parents as like as a clinician, right? And then they think that, like, well, if I'm nice to my kid,
yeah,
then they'll think that what they're doing is okay.
Yeah.
Like, on what planet do you think your kid's going to think that whatever he's doing is okay? He knows that it's not okay.
Right.
And you being mean to them
It's not going to do it.
doesn't help.
By the way, we're doing Avi Fishoff. I will tell you,
Yeah.
Avi has no, but Avi said something to me that really blew my mind.
Okay.
He said that, like, and parents will say to him that how are they going to know I don't think it's a good idea? So Avi said, let's give your kid a test, 500-question test,
Yeah.
on what you believe is good and what you believe is bad.
Right.
What do you think your kid's going to score? He's going to score 100 every
Fantastic.
single time.
Yeah.
You do not need to keep telling them this.
Right.
Like, they know what's good and bad, and it's just about your message of where it is.
Right.
So we got to do this with ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. No, 100%. I mean, I think that's very clear.
The truth is, the other night I met you, and you had just come back from Israel. You looked exhausted, and I think to myself, oh no, he took on so much. I actually felt it, like, oh boy, I guess I was projecting.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm right or maybe I'm wrong, but I didn't really think of the shlichus thing, honestly. I was
very tired.
You were very tired.
I was very tired.
You happened to be very tired. I was like, oh no.
No, I'd really run myself down.
Yeah.
On that trip, I really, really ran myself down. I've been running myself down lately.
Right.
You know, which is like, again, because we're not doing this perfectly. Like, we're sitting here talking as if we have it all figured out. Like, we have it somewhat figured out, right? But we don't have it all figured out, and like, you're doing it imperfectly. But like, running yourself down is part of like doing a lot of things.
Yeah.
You know, and like, and running yourself down, in my mind, is not unhealthy. It's like pretending that you're not running yourself down and not recognizing it, and then taking steps to try to like moderate it is what's unhealthy.
Right.
You know,
well, someone told me something recently. I love what you said. It's not unhealthy, because someone said, we got to always find our balance. And people talk about balance. He's like, there is no balance. You're either this way or this way. The key is, when you're this way, figure out how to go this way.
Right.
And then you're gonna be giving yourself too much time. You're taking too much naps.
Right.
And then you're like, okay, back to this. You see, it's not unhealthy if you're able to recognize it. That's what you're saying.
Right.
And the unhealthy is ignoring it.
Right.
Or not seeing it.
Right. Listen, if I'm passionate, it's like a guy wakes up in it, or like I woke up at certain points in my life and be like, I just want to feel great about what I'm doing. Okay, you want to feel great about what you're doing, but then not overdo it. Like, when we feel really good about something, we overdo it. It's just nature, right? Like, so of course I'm going to overdo it. Like if I didn't feel as passionate about what I'm doing as I do, I wouldn't have to worry about overdoing it, because I would just be mailing it in every day.
Right.
Right. But so it's just one of the consequences of having missionhood is doing that. And and to me, that's the only way to like survive. It's the only way to survive the world that we live in, like the very, very complex world that we live in today. The only way for us to survive is like is to have that sense of meaning and purpose, right? Which came from, just to segue, the other thing I wanted to talk to you about was which is another piece that I got from Moshe Weinberger. He told me, he asked me, like, have you read Man's Search for Meaning? And I was like, no. And he's like, well, you know, you're like an Orthodox.
Moshe Weinberger is the one who told you that?
Yeah.
So he told you about the Tanya and Man's Search for Meaning.
Yeah.
Does anybody else get to tell you about something awesome?
One meeting. That's crazy.
In one meeting.
In one meeting. It changed my whole life. That one meeting changed my whole life. Like fact. That whole meeting changed my whole life. Like 100%. Man's Search for Meaning. I mean, there have been other things and there's other influences in my life, but that
was your ayahuasca moment.
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't.
It changed my
one meeting.
It gave me direction that kind of changed everything. Because Man's Search for Meaning changed everything for me. It's interesting because I read Man's Search for Meaning and I didn't get it right away.
Right.
I was going to tell you, there was I got what I got from Man's Search for Meaning. For anyone who doesn't know, it's really really important for anyone to read it. You know, Viktor Frankl, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning, was a Vienna psychiatrist who was a student of Freud. You know, a young up and coming psychiatrist who was a Jew, and he went through the Holocaust.
Right.
And
also one of my favorite books. So.
And in the camps, he kind of it dawned on him that, well, two things dawned on him. One was that he was in a unique position to report back to his colleagues, to the psychiatric world, what it felt like to be in that kind of circumstance, because he was experiencing it himself. So he made himself into his own patient, so to speak. He was observing himself.
Right.
That was one piece. And then in that process of observing, he found that the people that survived, right, in scare quotes, were people that had a sense of meaning and purpose and had a certain sense of connectedness to the bigger nature of life, right? He even used an example, for example, like it wasn't so meaningful, but it was almost like there was these two guys that were surviving on his work detail that were constantly like talking every morning about how when they finally got out of the camps, they were going to go to some certain ice cream shop and which flavor they were going to have. And he was talking about how that imagery was their purpose. Their purpose was to survive in order to go have ice cream together.
I forgot about that, but that's how I get through fasts.
And that's so now what's interesting though is that I bring up Man's Search for Meaning a lot of times with clients. Then I had this client who was an older guy whose parents were Holocaust survivors, and he was more cynical, as survivors are and children of survivors sometimes are, of like Holocaust literature stuff. So he was like, what are you talking about? So I nudged him to read it. He read Man's Search for Meaning, and then we were processing it, and he said something that was very powerful. He said, you made a mistake because like the guys on the work detail probably died. So Frankl wasn't saying that like if you have a vision of your mission, you're going to survive physically. And then I went back and I read this, and Frankl says it pretty explicitly. He talks about how like surviving physically, like surviving the realities of the darkness of this world, to some degree is like luck. Like it's hashkacha. It's like whatever. Some people survive, some people don't, right? But what he's really talking about is how a person in the process of trying to live in a complex world can retain their sense of humanity, not lose themselves, die spiritually, right? And the only way to not die spiritually in the darkness of this world is to have some sense of missionhood. And the sense of missionhood is what drives you forward. It allows you to retain your sense of humanity. Right? That was very powerful.
Yeah.
And that took me about 10 years to like figure out, but it changed everything. Right? So like the shlichus gives you a sense of like drive to do more and more and more. And it allows you to not beat yourself up because like it's not about me. Right? I'm no longer, it disconnects me from all that pathology that was driving what I was doing that you were talking about earlier. Like I need to show the world that I'm important.
Right.
It's not about me being important, right? And the degree to which I'm connected to the shlichus is the degree to which I'm freed from that insanity. And then the other thing is that as I'm facing the challenges that come along with longevity, like burnout, right? I can stay connected, retain my humanity by remembering that like there's a mission here.
Right.
And then I stay human, right? And those things kind of all work together. All three of those things, I think.
It's amazing.
And if you ask my wife, she'd tell you it was crazy. So I don't know.
Don't ever talk to your wives. I want to do a podcast with everybody's wives.
Right, that would be a cool
Why don't
thing.
you tell us really what's going on?
What's actually going on.
I'm terrified. I want to have my wife on, but she won't come on. But I really just want to ask her about what she thinks about me. Like,
So I got my wife to come on my podcast.
really?
Here's what I did.
I didn't listen to that.
It was the 100th episode. I got
Yeah,
her to come
okay.
on. But I told her that it was the 100th episode. So I said, would you come on and interview me?
Okay.
And I'll give you the questions and you just ask them. But it was an angle.
You got her on.
Because then I got her to answer the questions.
I love it. Oh, she didn't even know it was coming.
She like, because as she was asking me the questions and I'm answering them,
Yeah, like,
she's
what
like
about
thinking
you?
about what she would say. So I'm like, what would you say? She didn't answer all of them, but she answered a bunch, and it was actually really remarkable. It was a lot of fun.
Okay, I'm going to use this technique. I have to figure out a technique. I really want to
You have
get
to do
her
it
on.
before she listens to this.
Yeah, no, she's not going to listen.
Oh, okay, good.
No, I'm kidding. She does listen. Every time I talk to you, see, interesting. I have like Rebbe colleagues.
Yeah,
I have this with Kiwi also. You know, like,
he's a real.
and my brother Ali. Like, you know, like we work together, but like I'm also always learning something.
Yeah.
What I feel with you is that like I could talk to you for 10 hours, and you're also a geek on certain topics that I could geek out on pretty hard.
Yeah.
Like I'm pretty sure whatever topic we pick, we're gonna have a full podcast on. I feel like I should have you on again, but that would be cool. I'm really honored to have you on the first video podcast.
Yeah, it's fun. It's been fun.
I will tell you, in honor of you, I did wear this revealed.
Yeah. Oh, we didn't
sweatshirt.
talk about that part. It's a major part of TLR.
It's
swag.
major part.
Cool swag is the major
Swag. This is from the living room.
It's the epic swag. Is the
What is the word revealed about? Remind me. I know I was on the
So it was a retreat.
A retreat.
And the theme of the retreat was like it was really about like people owning their own message. But parallel to that in recovery is like the message of anonymity. So it's like sharing of yourself while retaining the humility of anonymity, which is really like a foundation stone of the recovery process.
right.
So we did
Okay,
this-
we're not going to get into it. So, okay, sorry. I realize I have to wrap up, and I wanted to ask you one last question, which is, like, if you had, obviously you have a lot of platforms where you're reaching out to the world.
Yeah.
Tons of platforms, but you don't have my platform.
Yeah.
So, do you have a message? Like, I'm sure your message changes over the years, but like
Yeah.
right now, that you just want to get on top of the rooftops and just yell to the world. Is there anything like that you could say that?
More than I already said.
You said a lot of good things, but sometimes
this
it's like
thing
a
about
burning
the-
desire to just like, it could be the same thing, but like,
Right. Right. I think this thing about the shame thing is really like something that I'm like focusing on so much. Like I mean, you said it, it's about parenting ourselves, like to be kinder to ourselves. Like we're so unkind, but I don't mean kind by indulging ourselves. I don't mean that. I don't
Right.
think indulging ourselves works. I don't think indulging our kids works. I think sometimes you have to indulge as an expression of a normative process. Like sometimes you need to treat yourself.
is it about being proud of yourself?
It's about believing in yourself. I think it's about believing in yourself, like on both ends. Like I deserve to feel good, and I also deserve to be held accountable when I make mistakes, because I deserve to live up to myself, like to who I am destined to be. I don't mean destined like it's going to happen no matter what. I mean destined like Hashem put you here for a reason,
right?
Like to accomplish something, and like that we're doing the best we can to like do that the best we can. And when you do that, like when you take ownership of that, it changes everything. It changes everything. Like the same shame, like to me, there's no such, like shame is not a bad word. We've been in a context where like shame is a dirty word, but shame is not a dirty word. Toxic shame is a dirty word. The toxicity is the problem. Shame is one of the most powerful tools that a person can use to get better. And then I'll say
it's interesting because okay.
I have one more thing, and maybe we'll
say it.
Do an episode about this. But if you have one more thing,
yeah. Wait, let me just say one thing about the shame.
Yeah.
I just see it as this difference between shame and guilt.
Yeah.
Shame is I am bad, and guilt is I did something bad.
Yeah, I've used that semantic many times.
Right, but you're saying,
but like shame is the feeling that we have, because guilt is more of an opinion, and right, but shame is like a feeling that we have. And that feeling can be harnessed very powerfully for good inside of ourselves. A feeling of true regret for what we did. And when you postle all shame, when you say that all shame is negative, what you're taking away from yourself is the opportunity to experience the discomfort that comes along with coming into contact with who you truly deserve to be. And because we've trained ourselves as a people, partially because like we're emerging out of the generation that followed the Holocaust, I think, and the reactionary process of the Orthodox community from the Holocaust, where we only process that feeling in an abusive way, right? It's we try to leverage it to make ourselves or to make other people behave better. We try to leverage it to like manipulate, and sometimes in a really gross way to put people down. But like it's actually a very powerful tool, and there's been this like tendency to like let's just shut the shame off, right? But that's not actually good for you. Like it's not good for you. Like getting rid of all the shame is not the goal. I used to think that way. I used to use that semantic. Like guilt is good, shame is bad, right? Rabbi Twersky like talked about that, and it's very powerful. But there's a piece that I've been thinking a lot about, and I've been writing about, and meditating on, which is that like we're selling ourselves short by being embarrassed of shame, or being holding ourselves back from owning shame, because like the fact that I feel ashamed of myself is because really underneath I know that I deserve to live better. And if I'm doing it in a way that makes me feel less than, that I'm doing it wrong. And if I'm doing it in a way that makes me want to behave bad more, then I'm doing it wrong. And a lot of people do it wrong.
You're making me so happy.
But learning how to do it right. I have the
same thing. I do this with anger. I don't know if you ever thought about it.
Yeah.
Because my whole life I spent like really working on my anger. Like don't get angry, and anger's bad. And then I realized like anger is the one part of me that really thinks I'm awesome. Like it's my best pep talk. Like you could use it wrong.
Right.
But when I get angry, it's like, get up.
Right.
Usually it follows depression and sadness, and like it's like, come on, you're the best. This guy can't step on you. He can't. You're it. Get up and go. And it's like I feel what you're saying about shame. I have very strongly felt it, and I've gotten like this relief when I feel anger. I'm like, it's here. It's telling me to get up and it's such a different feeling. See, what you're saying with shame, I'm ashamed that I was doing the guilt shame thing, because I'm a chused. I'm a chused right now. Let's go. I'm joining. I love it. I love it. What was the other thing you wanted to say? Sorry. Forget it.
Thing. I don't know. I was going to say something about how, like, as a society in the Orthodox culture, I've been thinking about this a lot also. We went from being, like, trauma uninformed to being trauma informed to being trauma obsessed. And we need to stop.
Right. Because
we're making everyone into victims. I think that being trauma informed is important. I think it's important to acknowledge trauma. But, like, we take it so far that we're making ourselves, we're what's the word? We're cutting
this
ourselves
is what
off
we call in the therapeutic community a doorknob. Dude, that is, You know what I'm saying?
You said I had something to say. You know?
Yeah, you did. I'm sorry. This is like a whole nother topic.
Yeah, it's a whole topic.
Okay.
But I think we need to talk about it. I think
We have to talk about it.
We shifted so far in the opposite direction. I'm just observing people coming out of treatment or people that are in treatment.
Right.
They're just disempowered for their own lives because they just like being trauma informed doesn't mean that we're victims. We're not. We've been victimized, but we're not victims. And acknowledging trauma is a powerfully important thing to do.
You're saying
like, that's
something
not who
very
you are.
intense here.
Yeah,
I love it. Bring shame and anger back. That's what you call this episode. Come on. They got a bad rap all these years. Trauma. Ugh. The truth is, there is a point where like I literally don't want to say trauma for a couple of days.
Right.
Just give me a break. I got it. I understand. Very traumatized, very triggered. I got it. Could we just get better?
Right.
I'm totally with you.
Listen, obviously it's a balance. I don't mean to, whatever. It goes without saying.
Okay, we're gonna finish up. I loved having you.
Yeah,
This was
great to
super,
have you.
super
It's
fun.
great to be here.
Great to have me. You're on my bag podcast now.
I'm sorry. I apologize.
I love you, man. It was awesome.
All right.
Thank you for this day that I've been given. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for this chance. Thank you for this chance to live anew.